Hi everyone, the Random Home Cook here. Today I will make a dish we call Kufta. This easy recipe can feed many people with very little effort and can be easily scaled up to serve more. It can be prepared in advance, as I do sometimes, saving a lot of time in our busy lives. Looking around, I found that there are many dishes called Kufta, all different. Here is our version. If you like this video and you would like to see more, please subscribe, leave a comment below and press the notification bell. But let's get cooking. Ingredients for 4 to 5 people are 500 grams of lamb mince, 900 grams of potatoes, 450 grams of onions, 600 grams of tomatoes, mix of spices, 10 grams of chopped flat leaf parsley, salt, extra virgin olive oil, 120 grams tahini or sesame paste. Wash the tomatoes, remove the core, peel and wash the onions and potatoes. Once all the vegetables are ready, let's start making the meatballs mix. Using a box grater, grate 1 onion and 1 tomato, as I show in the video. If you prefer, you can use a food processor with grater insert. You can also grate half of sweet pepper, or if you want to make it spicy, add some chili. I try different options, but I always return to this version. This is also a good way of including veggies in a child's diet, as the onion and tomato will virtually disappear in the meatballs. Set aside any leftover of onions and tomatoes that you can't grate anymore. You will add them later to the tray. If you notice an excess of tomato water, then drain it a bit. I'm not doing this here because in this case it is fine, but sometimes I remove between 1 to 3 tablespoons of excess water. Now, add the meat and the parsley. I use parsley that I freeze myself. It is quite handy to have it in the freezer on demand. If you like to see how I do that, leave a comment. Of course, you can use fresh or dried if you prefer. Then add salt, spices and oil. You can find the spice mix details in the video description below. Salt and pepper depends on your taste. Here I think I use about 10 to 14 grams of salt for 500 grams of meat. But you need to adjust it to your taste and amount of vegetables. Mix well the ingredients with clean hands. If you don't like touching the meat, you can wear gloves or simply use a spoon. Just make sure that all ingredients are mixed thoroughly. You can prepare the meatball mix in advance and let it rest in the fridge. Then you can use it later in the day or even the day after. When the mixer starts to get sticky, it is ready. Set aside the meatball mix and prepare the rest of the vegetables. Get the tomatoes and slice them. They will cook quickly, so slice of 5 to 6 mm thickness will be fine. You do not need to be very precise. Sometimes I cut them in wedges, and they cook perfectly as well. I use a very sharp knife to cut easily the tomato skin. Please be careful using knives. Then continue with all the tomatoes and set them aside. You can use a food processor to cut all the vegetables to speed up this process. That is the longest. I personally prefer to cut them manually. Slice the potatoes as well. These need to be anything around 3 to 5 mm thick. Anything thicker will require longer cooking time, which most likely will cause the meat to overcook and or dry out. So try to keep those on the thinner side. If they roast and crisp up a bit, it's just better. But if they start to burn before the meat is done, then you slice them too thin. Anyway, 1 or 2 of size are fine, don't worry, you don't need a ruler. Put the potatoes aside and slice the onions. Cut them as thin as you can. They need a longer cooking time to get tender, so the thinner the better. For me at least. If you like the extra crunchy texture, then thicker it is fine. I just do not like it. Again, don't worry if they are not all of the same thickness. After this step, it is a good moment to preheat the oven to around 160-180 degrees Celsius if ventilated, or 180 to 200 degrees if static. Done with slicing? It is time to assemble all the ingredients. Take a large tray. I use an aluminium one of about 42 by 32 cm. Lightly grease the tray with some extra virgin olive oil. Then take the meatball mix and make some meatballs. I show you two ways to do this, with one hand and two hands. But you can use your own technique. Shape the meatballs, gently press the mix together. If you prefer, use both hands, rolling the meat between them. It doesn't need to be a perfect shape, but aim for a similar size, not too small. Using 500 grams of meat, I normally end up making 10 meatballs. If you end up with one more or less, it is fine. Better slightly bigger than smaller though, to avoid overcooking and drying out. Place them on the tray as you go. I like to put them in a pattern, however, you will see that this is short-lived. Then add a layer of tomatoes. Spread them evenly. Do not forget the leftovers preparing the meatball mix. Done with the tomatoes, add a layer of onions. Even if it looks a lot of vegetables, they tend to shrink a lot during cooking. And finally, you can place a layer of potatoes. As visible from the list of ingredients, we use a lot of potatoes and tomatoes and a bit less onion. You can adjust the proportion according to your taste. Add some extra virgin olive oil, then season the potatoes with salt, nutmeg and black pepper. This time, the salt and spices are just to top up the seasoning for the potatoes. If the tomatoes are not juicy enough, you can add a little bit of water in the tray. You can also add a bit of water during cooking if you see that the ingredients are getting too dry. Once done, it is time for the oven. Place the tray in the preheated oven and then come back every 30 minutes to turn the vegetables and meatballs for an even cooking. Gently turn the ingredients using a couple of tablespoons. The aim is to flip the meat and vegetables to allow an even cooking and crisp up on all sides. As you can see, they are darker on the top, and this action will allow to maintain moisture. Always check the liquid. Once cooked, you want a bit of sauce, but not too watery. When the potatoes are cooked, you can check the meat, which should be done. All it should take 2, maximum 3 turns, or about 1 hour to 1 hour and a half. Depending on the oven temperature and the amount of vegetables and meat, this time might vary. However, keep cooking until the potatoes are tender and the meat is done. Once you think it's done, for example at the second turn, add the tahini, the sesame paste. This is not mandatory, but we love the taste. Then mix once more and place the tray in the oven for another 10 minutes each. This dish can be served with rice, which I highly recommend, or flatbread. If you use the quantity listed and you add rice, you can serve more people. To do so, cook the rice to be ready at the same time of the kufta. For example, when I use basmati rice, which I simply boil and strain, I normally start to cook it 10-15 minutes before serving, around the time I add the tahini. Depending, however, on the technique, amount and type of rice, this time varies extremely, but I leave you to tune the timing with your favorite rice. After 10 minutes, take it out and serve, or let it rest for a few minutes before serving. This is how it looks once it's done. It may look a bit messy, but it smells and tastes amazing. The meatballs are very tender and moist, delicious. It is perfectly cooked, and I know it will be very good. You can improve the presentation if you want, but because it doesn't last very long in our plates, I never actually thought about that until now. Here how it looks like without and with the rice. We like to shape the rice in a dome using a bowl to make a nice presentation. Thank you for watching, see you next time.